Hit Refresh by Satya Nadella. Introduction. Imagine this. You're a young, brilliant engineer, just starting your career. You've landed an interview at one of the most powerful, most innovative companies on the planet, Microsoft. You make it through a full day of grueling technical questions, solving complex problems on whiteboards, proving your intellectual chops. You're feeling confident. Then, for your final interview, a manager sits you down. He doesn't ask you about code. He doesn't ask about your experience. He looks at you and asks one simple question. Imagine you see a baby lying in the street, and the baby is crying. What do? You're an engineer. You think logically, systematically. The answer is obvious. You call 911, you reply, without a moment's hesitation. The manager stands up, walks you to the door, and puts his arm around your shoulder. You need some empathy, man, he says gently. If a baby is lying on a street crying, pick up the baby. That young engineer was Satya Nadella. And somehow, despite that answer, he got the job. 22 years later, he would become the third CEO in Microsoft's entire history, taking over a company that many believed was a fallen giant, a kingdom in decline. And the one quality he would place at the very center of its revival, the very soul of its transformation, was the one thing he so clearly lacked in that first interview: empathy. Today, we're diving into his incredible story, outlined in his book, Hit Refresh. This isn't just another business book filled with corporate jargon and 10-step plans. This is a deeply human story about a man's personal transformation, the cultural rebirth of a legendary company, and a breathtaking vision for the future of humanity and technology. Since its release, Hit Refresh has become a guide for leaders everywhere, selling hundreds of thousands of copies and proving that the softest skills can produce the hardest results. By the end of our journey today, you'll understand how a personal tragedy can become the source of a leader's greatest strength, how a company can rediscover its soul by looking beyond profits, and you will learn the single, most valuable quality you must cultivate to thrive in a world that's about to be reshaped by artificial intelligence, mixed reality, and technology we can barely even imagine. This is the story of how to hit refresh, not just on your browser, but on your life, your work, and your vision for the future. Book summary. In the early 2010s, Microsoft was in trouble. On the outside, it was still a titan, a multi-billion-dollar empire built on the dominance of Windows and Office. But on the inside, the culture had grown stagnant, even toxic. A cartoonist famously captured the mood by drawing an organizational chart of Microsoft, not with boxes and lines, but with warring gangs, each division pointing a gun at the others. The saddest part? No one at Microsoft disagreed. The company that had put a computer on every desk was now seen as a follower, not a leader. They had missed the boat on mobile phones, they were late to search engines, and the very spirit of innovation was being suffocated by bureaucracy and internal politics. The company was sick. Its employees were tired, frustrated, and fed up with losing. They had joined Microsoft to change the world, but now they felt stuck, bickering in meetings while nimbler rivals like Apple and Google were defining the future. This was the company Satya Nadella, a 22-year veteran and a consummate insider, was asked to lead in February 2014. The world was watching, skeptical that an insider could be the one to fix a broken internal culture. They expected a bold outsider. Instead, they got a quiet, thoughtful engineer who had spent his entire career within the very system that needed to change. How could he possibly be the answer? The answer didn't come from a business school textbook or a management seminar. It came from a place of deep personal pain and profound transformation. It came from learning, the hard way, how to pick up the crying baby. A few years after joining Microsoft, Satya and his wife, Anu, were eagerly expecting their first child, Zan. They were young, successful, and full of dreams. Their biggest concerns were about how soon Anu might return to her career as an architect after maternity leave. But one night, During the 36th week of her pregnancy, Anu noticed the baby wasn't moving as much as usual. They rushed to the emergency room, thinking it was just the anxiety of new parents. It wasn't. Zahn was born that night via an emergency C-section, weighing only 3 pounds. He did not cry. Due to asphyxiation in the womb, he had suffered catastrophic brain damage, resulting in severe cerebral palsy. He would be confined to a wheelchair and completely reliant on his parents for the rest of his life. Satya was devastated. In his own words, he was sad for how things had turned out for him and Anu. He saw it as a personal tragedy, a cruel twist of fate that had derailed their perfect plans. It was his wife, Anu, who gently guided him toward a different perspective. She helped him understand that this was not about what had happened to him. It was about what had happened to Zahn. It was about developing a deep, profound empathy for his son's pain and his circumstances. This was the moment Satya Nadella's real education began. Being a father to a child with special needs took him on an emotional journey that reshaped his entire worldview. It forced him to see the world through another person's eyes, to understand their struggles, their needs, and their humanity. It taught him the true meaning of empathy, not as a concept in an interview question, but as a lived, daily reality. He says that ideas excite him, but empathy grounds and centers him. This new, hard-won empathy would become the bedrock of his personal philosophy and, eventually, his leadership. He began to connect this newfound human understanding to his work as a technologist. He saw how a simple Windows app, built by 3 high school students, could give Zahn the freedom to control his own music with a tap of his head against a sensor on his wheelchair. For a boy who couldn't move his limbs, this small piece of technology was a gateway to joy and independence. The empathy of 3 teenagers had brought his son happiness. This became his why. This was the soul he wanted to bring back to Microsoft. It wasn't about beating Apple or out-innovating Google. It was about using technology as a tool for empowerment. When he finally took the helm as CEO, he told his employees that his highest priority was to renew the company's culture. He knew that to get the company moving again, he couldn't just issue top-down orders. He had to change the way people thought, the way they worked together, the very heart of the organization. He had to get them to drop their proverbial guns and start listening to each other, and most importantly, to their customers. One of his first, and most symbolic, acts was to transform the company's most important meeting, the weekly Senior Leadership Team, or SLT. This was the room where the leaders of those warring gangs would meet. In the past, these meetings were formal, rigid, and often adversarial. Satya changed everything. He moved the meeting from the state executive boardroom to a relaxed, open space frequented by game developers. He got rid of the tables and chairs, replacing them with comfortable couches arranged in a large circle. There were no laptops, no phones. There was no place to hide. And then, he brought in an outsider, Drive. Michael Gervais, a psychologist who had worked with the Seattle Seahawks football team on mindfulness and high performance. Drive. Gervais started with a simple exercise. He asked the room full of high-powered, world-class executives, "Are you interested in having an extraordinary individual experience?" Everyone nodded. "Of course." "Then I need a volunteer to stand up," he said. Silence. An awkward, deafening silence. Here was a room full of people who ran multi-billion-dollar divisions, who considered themselves the smartest people in the room, and not one of them would volunteer. The reason, as it slowly came out, was fear. Fear of being ridiculed. Fear of failing. Fear of not looking like the smartest person in the room. And underneath it all, a touch of arrogance. "I'm too important for these games." This was the Microsoft culture in a nutshell. A culture of know-it-alls, not learn-it-alls. Slowly, painfully at first, Gervais broke down the walls. He challenged them, he encouraged them, and one by one, they began to open up. For the first time, these leaders talked not just about business, but about themselves. They shared their personal passions, their spiritual beliefs, their struggles as parents. Satya himself shared the deeply personal story of his son Zan, and how it taught him the power of empathy. That day, something shifted. The leaders in that room began to see each other not as rivals, but as human beings. They realized that no single person could be the hero of Microsoft's renewal. It would take all of them, bringing their whole selves to the mission. It was the beginning of a cultural renaissance. This new culture was built on a simple yet profound idea that Satya borrowed from the psychologist Drive. Carol Dweck, the growth mindset. Dweck's research shows that people generally fall into two categories. Those with a fixed mindset believe their talents and intelligence are static, carved in stone. They are afraid of failure because they see it as a judgment on their inherent ability. On the other hand, those with a growth mindset believe that their abilities can be developed through passion, toil, and training. They embrace challenges and see failure not as a verdict, but as a lesson, an opportunity to grow. For years, Microsoft had been a company of know-it-alls, dominated by a fixed mindset. You had to be the smartest person in the room. You couldn't admit you didn't know something. You couldn't admit you were wrong. Satya's mission was to transform it into a company of learn-it-alls, a place driven by curiosity, not ego. A place where it was safe to say, "I don't know, let's find out," or "I made a mistake, here's what I learned." This wasn't just a feel-good slogan. It fundamentally changed how Microsoft operated. Satya himself modeled this behavior in a very public and, for him, embarrassing way. Early in his tenure, he was speaking at the Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing. He was asked for his advice to women who are uncomfortable asking for a pay raise. He gave a rambling, clumsy answer about having faith in the system and the good karma of not asking. He said it was a superpower. The backlash was immediate and fierce. He was rightly criticized across the media and social networks. The old Microsoft might have gotten defensive, issued a carefully worded corporate statement, and moved on. But Satya, embracing the growth mindset, did something different. Within hours, he sent an email to the entire company. He didn't make excuses. He said, flat out, "I answered that question completely wrong." He admitted his mistake, acknowledged his own unconscious bias, and used it as a teaching moment for himself and the entire company. He leaned into the failure and learned from it in public. He was showing, not just telling, what a growth mindset looked like under pressure. This new mindset unlocked a wave of change across the company. It led to three crucial shifts in strategy. First, customer obsession. The company shifted from obsessing over its competitors to obsessing over its customers. It was no longer about beating Apple, it was about serving people who use Apple products. This led to one of the most shocking and symbolic moments of the new Microsoft. At a conference, Satya Nadella walked on stage, reached into his pocket, and pulled out an iPhone. There was a gasp in the auditorium. He proceeded to show how the iPhone was a great device, made even better because it ran all of Microsoft's software, Outlook, Word, Excel. The message was clear: we will meet our customers wherever they are. We're no longer fighting a war over operating systems, we're in the business of empowering people, regardless of the device they use. This philosophy extended even to old enemies. For years, Microsoft had viewed the open-source operating system Linux as a cancer, a mortal enemy. But customers loved Linux and were using it to build their businesses. A customer-obsessed Microsoft had to embrace it. Soon, a slide appeared in presentations that would have been unthinkable just years earlier. It read, simply, Microsoft, heart emoji, Linux. The company that once fought to protect its closed ecosystem was now one of the biggest contributors to open-source software in the world. They were learning to grow the pie for everyone, not just fight for their slice. The second major shift was toward becoming mobile-first and cloud-first. This was a profound change in worldview. For decades, Microsoft had been a PC-centric company. Everything revolved around Windows. Satya recognized that the future wasn't about a single device. It was about the mobility of the human experience across all devices, phones, tablets, PCs, consoles, and the thing that would power this seamless experience was the cloud. The cloud is essentially a global network of massive data centers that provide the storage and computational power for everything we do online, from streaming movies on Netflix to running a business on Microsoft's own platform, Azure. When Satya took over, Microsoft was dangerously behind Amazon in the cloud business. It was a small, struggling part of the company, and many insiders wanted to abandon it to focus on the traditional, profitable server business. This was Satya's young men and fire moment. He references a book by Norman Maclean that tells the tragic story of a group of smoke jumper firefighters. Their leader knew that to escape a massive blaze, they needed to light a small escape fire and lie in the ashes. It was a counterintuitive strategy, and because he hadn't built enough trust and shared understanding with his team, they refused to follow him. They ran, and they perished. Satya knew he faced a similar challenge. He had to convince his team to run toward the small, uncertain fire of the cloud, and away from the seemingly safe, but ultimately doomed, comfort of their old business. He didn't bring in his own team. He worked to convince the existing leaders from within. He listened, he built a shared context, and he painted a clear vision. The cloud wasn't a threat to their server business, it was its future. By embracing a hybrid model where customers could use both their own private servers and the public cloud, Microsoft could offer something its competitors couldn't. He changed the name of their cloud platform from Windows Azure to Microsoft Azure, signaling that it was for everyone, not just Windows users. He pushed the team to embrace Linux on their platform. The bet paid off. Today, Microsoft's cloud business is a massive growth engine, a multi-billion-dollar enterprise competing head-to-head with Amazon, and it's the foundation for everything the company does. The third, and perhaps most exciting, shift was to bet big on the future. With a renewed culture and a strong foundation in the cloud, Satya greenlit investments in technologies that had been languishing for years. He believed a company had to be willing to lean into uncertainty and take risks on the next wave of innovation. He focused on 3 transformative technologies that will shape our world for decades to come. The first is mixed reality. You've probably heard of virtual reality, or VR, where you put on a headset and are completely immersed in a digital world. Microsoft's vision, embodied by their HoloLens device, is different. HoloLens doesn't block out the real world, it blends the digital and physical worlds together. It turns your field of view into an infinite computer screen. Satya describes his first experience with a prototype. He put on the headset and was suddenly standing on the surface of Mars, data fed directly from NASA's Curiosity rover. He could see his own 2 feet on the dusty red planet, and he could walk around and inspect Martian rocks. At the same time, he could still see the real room around him, the desks and the people. A member of his leadership team was so moved by the experience, she cried. He instantly saw that this wasn't just for video games. This was a tool that could revolutionize medicine, allowing a surgeon to overlay a 3D model of a patient's organs during an operation. It could transform education, letting students explore the inside of a human cell or walk through ancient Rome. It could change how we work, allowing an architect to walk through a holographic model of her building before a single brick is laid. This, he believes, is the ultimate computing experience. The second bet is on artificial intelligence, or AI. We're all familiar with AI through digital assistants like Siri or Alexa. But Satya's vision goes far beyond that. The debate around AI is often trapped in a utopia versus dystopia framework. Either friendly robots will do all our chores, or evil machines will take over the world. Satya argues for a third path: humans with machines. He believes the goal of AI should be to augment human capability, not replace it. Think of Saqib Sheikh, a blind Microsoft engineer. He and his team developed an AI application that runs on a pair of smart glasses. The AI essentially sees the world for him, and describes it to him through an earpiece. It can read a restaurant menu to him. It can tell him the expressions on his colleagues' faces in a meeting. It can even help him find his loved ones in a crowded park. This is AI as an empowerment tool, a technology that expands human experience. But as AI becomes more powerful, Satya argues that we need a clear ethical framework to guide its development. He proposes a set of principles. AI must be designed to assist humanity and respect human autonomy. It must be transparent, so we understand how it makes decisions. It must be designed to guard against bias, so it doesn't perpetuate human prejudices. And it must have algorithmic accountability, so that humans can undo any unintended harm. He is calling for a new kind of social contract for this age of AI. The third and most mind-bending bet is on quantum computing. If today's computers are like candles, a quantum computer is like a laser beam. Classical computers work with bits, which can be either a 0 or a 1. Quantum computers use qubits, which can be a 0, a 1, or both at the same time. This seemingly small difference allows them to perform certain calculations exponentially faster than any computer that exists today. This isn't about building a faster laptop to check your email. This is about building a new kind of tool to solve humanity's biggest, most complex problems. A quantum computer could simulate molecules with perfect accuracy, allowing us to discover new medicines and cure diseases like cancer. It could help us invent new materials to create highly efficient batteries or solve climate change by discovering a better way to produce fertilizer. It's a technology so powerful it could crack today's strongest encryption in minutes, but also create new, unbreakable forms of security. Microsoft is in a global race with companies like Google and IBM, and even governments, to be the first to build a scalable, universal quantum computer. These three shifts: a renewed culture based on empathy and a growth mindset, a business strategy centered on the cloud and customer obsession, and bold bets on the future of computing, are the pillars of Satya Nadella's transformation of Microsoft. But underlying all of it is a deeper philosophy about the role of a company in the world. He calls it the trust equation. In a world where our lives are increasingly lived online, where corporations and governments have access to vast amounts of our personal data, trust is the most valuable currency. He believes trust is earned through a combination of empathy, shared values, and safety and reliability, all demonstrated consistently over time. This belief was put to the test during the Sony Pictures hack in 2014. Hackers, allegedly sponsored by North Korea, attacked Sony in retaliation for the satirical movie The Interview. They released embarrassing emails and threatened any theater that showed the film. Sony, facing massive financial losses and security threats, pulled the theatrical release. Microsoft, along with other tech companies, faced a choice. Should they help distribute the film online and stand up for free speech, even if it meant making themselves the next target? Their own security engineers warned them of the enormous risk. But Satya and his team decided that some values are non-negotiable. They believed that being bold in supporting constitutional rights was consistent with Microsoft's core purpose. On Christmas Day, working around the clock to secure their networks, they released The Interview on their Xbox video platform. It was a principled stand, a demonstration that they were willing to put their values ahead of short-term safety. This leads to the final, and perhaps most important question that Nadella wrestles with throughout Hit Refresh: what is the role of a multinational corporation in our modern world? He argues that it's no longer enough for a global company to simply enter a country, extract profits, and leave. In an age of rising inequality and anti-globalization sentiment, companies have a responsibility to create local economic opportunity everywhere they operate. He says his goal is for Microsoft to be the platform provider underneath the world's entrepreneurial energy. They make the tools that help other people make things, and make things happen. Whether it's the young women in Cairo building apps to help Syrian refugees, or a startup in India using Microsoft's AI to predict heart conditions in rural villages, the mission is the same: to use technology as a democratizing force that spreads opportunity to everyone, not just a privileged few. At its heart, Satya Nadella's story is one of profound optimism. It's a belief in the power of people to learn and to grow. It's a belief that a company, even a giant one, can have a soul. And it's a belief that technology, guided by human empathy, can be a force for good in the world. He ends the book by returning to that first, haunting question, why do I exist? And he extends it to all of us. He asks us to find our own passions, our own sense of purpose, and to connect them to something larger than ourselves. Because when we do that, we don't just hit refresh on a piece of technology. We hit refresh on our potential to change the world. Commentary. As we close the pages of Hit Refresh, it's easy to get caught up in the high-tech wizardry of quantum computing and mixed reality. But to do so would be to miss the book's most profound and enduring lesson. The most powerful technology Satya Nadella writes about isn't a piece of hardware or a line of code. It's empathy. This is what makes Hit Refresh so unique. It's a book from the CEO of one of the world's most powerful tech companies that argues, persuasively, that our humanity is our greatest asset. In an age where we are all anxious about machines taking our jobs and algorithms making our decisions, Nadella reminds us that the skills that will become most scarce, and therefore most valuable, are the ones that are uniquely human: creativity, judgment, collaboration, and above all, empathy. The story of his personal journey with his son Zahn is the heart of this book, and it's what gives his corporate strategy such authenticity. His focus on culture isn't a management fad, it's a deeply held conviction born from lived experience. He learned firsthand that to truly connect with and help another person, you must first see the world from their perspective. He then had the wisdom to apply that deeply personal lesson to a 100,000-person corporation. The shift from a know-it-all to a learn-it-all culture is more than just a clever phrase, it's a blueprint for relevance in the 21st century. So, what can we take from this? How can we apply these lessons in our own lives, right now? First, we can consciously adopt a growth mindset. The next time you face a challenge or make a mistake, ask yourself, is this a verdict on my abilities, or is it an opportunity to learn? The simple act of reframing failure as feedback can unlock incredible personal growth. As Nadella demonstrated after his karma blunder, true strength isn't about never falling, it's about how you get back up, what you learn, and how you use that lesson to be better. Second, we can practice active empathy. This doesn't mean you have to agree with everyone. It means you have to seek to understand them. In your next conversation, try listening not just to respond, but to truly hear what the other person is saying and feeling. As Nadella discovered, whether you're designing a product, leading a team, or just being a good friend, everything starts with understanding the needs of others. Finally, we can all ask ourselves that same existential question: why do I exist? What is the unique contribution that only I can make? Nadella believes that true satisfaction comes from connecting our personal passions to a larger purpose. It's about using our individual talents not just for our own benefit, but to empower others. Whether you're a student, an artist, an entrepreneur, or an engineer, you have the ability to make things that help other people make things, and make things happen. That was a summary of Hit Refresh by Satya Nadella. We've touched on the main ideas today, but a summary is like looking at a travel brochure. It can show you the pictures, but it can't give you the feeling of actually being there. The real power of this book is in the quiet, reflective moments of reading it yourself, where Nadella's journey becomes a mirror for your own. If his story of transformation, of finding purpose in the face of adversity, and of leading with humanity has resonated with you, I encourage you to pick up a copy. It's more than a business book, it's a guide to leading a more thoughtful, empathetic, and impactful life in an age of profound change. The link to the book is in the description. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please take a moment to click that like button and subscribe to the channel. It lets us know we're on the right track and ensures you won't miss our next deep dive into another world-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.